This is Leon Drew with the Crypto Crew. I'm going to be talking this afternoon with Mary Katherine about some of her experiences down her way. Mary Katherine, well, glad you agreed to do this interview. Can you tell me where you're from?
I'm in West Alabama, close to Tuscaloosa City. I don't live in the city. I live in the northern part of it, but it's called West Alabama.
Alrighty. And yeah, you and I have talked a couple of times, and it sounds like you've been having some interesting things down there. When did your activity down in that area start? And tell me a little bit about what you think the activity is.
Well, it started in the middle of March. My husband and I went and bought a puppy, and we were outside talking to my daughter-in-law, and we heard something come between my house and my grandmother's house, and it had this long, deep, guttural yell. It sounded like a man, and it had a roar to it. And it screamed out about 3 times. And then I got to playing around with it. I've been watching the Bigfoot shows, and they had told us that how you mimic them and they'll answer back. Before this started happening, I was not a believer. I was not a skeptic, but I was open because my grandfather had saw one in 1930 in a gravel pit one night, and I didn't know he had that sighting. I mean, I wasn't even born, but I came home from watching Legend of Boggy Creek, and I told my sister about it, and that's when she informed me about it.
Oh, okay.
So I heard this. I knew it wasn't something that was native to this area.
Now you mentioned March. Was that March of 2014?
No, sir. It was middle of March in 2012, and it was. And I didn't know this at the time, but in Newbern, Alabama, that's when all the kids on the school bus saw what they said was a gorilla, but the teacher said it was a gorilla, but the kids said it was a Bigfoot. And that was going on the same time it was happening here, too.
Okay. So you've been almost 3 years now that you've been having activity in there. Now, have you actually physically seen any of these creatures?
I did. March 31st, we had a very, like I said, I was going out playing around and making the yells. Well, that night there was coming up a storm, and I went outside, and I made out one of the yells, and there wasn't one, but there was 2 out there that was screaming real bad, just constantly screaming, and it was so loud it vibrated your chest, and just had the air charged and stuff, and they kept screaming for the longest. And the next night, which was April 1st, my mother and my father, I'd been telling my mother about it, and they came over about dusty dark. They wanted to hear it. And we heard this horrible grunting sound out toward my chicken house, which there wasn't no chickens in there, but my cattle was out in the field. And I kept looking. There was enough light for me to see one squatted down beside my chicken house, rocking back and forth, and then it stood up. It took 2 steps over, and then squatted back down, and what it was doing, it was watching us, and I saw it. And that's the only time that I have personally seen it, but I've heard it a lot and saw signs.
Right. And now, when you saw that night, how big do you think it was?
Oh, it was huge. I didn't say anything to my parents. We didn't know it at the time. My daddy was real sick, and he was 82, and I didn't want to frighten him, but I just had my eyes open, and I kept watching it. I would say, squatted down. It's hard for me to judge. All I know is it squatted down. Its head was still higher than the back of the cattle out there. Squatted down. When it stood up, it was way higher than, it was walking around my cows. It didn't bother them.
Okay, so would you say that when it was squatted down, it may have been 5 feet tall?
About 4 foot, maybe 4.5 foot tall. It was squatted down, and it was big, and the reason why I kept, staring at it, I said, that's not one of the cows and everything. And I mean, I could still see it, but I knew it was not one of the cattle. And when it stood up straight, and it took 2 side steps over and then squatted back down. And my mother that night, she kept seeing eye shine in the woods on the edge, but it never would make those yells back at me. They knew that there was a stranger here.
Right. Now, when it stood up, would you think it was, what would you estimate, 7 to 8 feet maybe, or a little bit taller, or?
I would say it was, well, I take that back. I did get a video the same night where I had my camera out, video camera, and it was going toward the outside, and I saw something. I've got this green tree, and it peeked around the tree and then went back in, like it saw the camera and went back in. I could see the eye shine. Well, I showed it to my son, and he's 6'5". I said, don't you go stand out there beside the porch, because I had it marked where it was at from the video camera, and he went out there and stood beside it. Now, I'm 6'5", and where the eyes was, it was a good foot, a good foot over him. So that's not even the top of his head.
Right.
So I would say he's about 8 foot.
Okay. And that night that you saw it with the cattle, how long did that encounter last?
Well, I got scared after it screamed so much. I mean, are you talking about the night it started screaming, or the night that I saw it?
The night you saw it was when it was wandering in and out of your cattle.
Well, my mother and my daddy went home. I had to go out and walk the puppy. So I've got a night light, out by my driveway, and I take my little puppy. He's about 2 months old, and I had to take him out for a walk. And I was scared. I mean, I'm not going to tell you no lie. I was frightened to death. And I'm standing out there, and then right on the other side of my house, I heard one of those grunts real loud by my pear tree. It's right on the other. If you're looking at the front of my house, in the picture, there's a pear tree at the right of the porch. It was right there, and I heard it. And then that's later on that I went into the house that I saw the eye shine come around the camera, because I was still filming it. I was videoing it, but I didn't. All I saw was the eyes, and it was pretty creepy. But after that, I wouldn't go outside day or night.
Right.
Without my husband or somebody out there with me, and I definitely didn't go out without a pistol.
Right. So that night, that encounter kind of happened on and off for probably 3 hours, maybe 3.5 hours?
Yes. It was about, I would say they came over here about 6:30, and this was like about 9:30 or, about 3 hours or more.
So over the last 3 years, you've been having activity there in your area. How often is the activity? Is it happening, once or twice a week, every night, on and off, or how would you describe the frequency of the activity?
There's given times where there's a lot of activity, and it's usually in March. March was when I first heard it come up, and then in October, right before hunting season, I noticed that it started, coming back up, because I kind of got over my fear a little bit, and my dog was getting big, and I wouldn't let it outside by itself. And that one particular afternoon, my husband was going to check on the house that we own over on a different road, and like I said, I wouldn't go in and out. I mean, I was too frightened to go outside. And so I had the dog out with me. He was about 6 months old or something, but he loved to play with the ball. And I was out in the field, and I was laughing, I was giggling, and he left, and I kept laughing and giggling. And down on the wood line, on the left side of my house, down in that holler, I started hearing limb breaks. I mean, it wasn't little twigs. I mean, it was too loud to be little twigs. And the brush is so thick, you wouldn't have a car, or you couldn't get a four-wheeler or anything like that in there. And I knew it wasn't hunting season, and I heard the limbs breaking, and I said, Sledge, be quiet. And by that time, I started going again and playing with him. But like I said, I was laughing and giggling with him, and I sounded like a kid out there. And then the next thing I know, I hear something big moving through that brush, and it was huge. And I grabbed him, and I said, come on, boy. And I had to literally drag him into the house. I mean, he didn't have a quick care in the world, but because he was so young. But I come in, and I grabbed the megaphone, and I cut the soldering on the megaphone, and I yelled. I said, get out of the woods, get out of the woods. And just in case it was a hunter. And about that time, my husband, I was talking to my mother. I asked her, I said, is hunting season in? She says, no, why? I said, Mama, I was outside and something big was moving through the woods, snapping limbs and everything. I didn't know this at the time. My husband drove up, and I didn't hear him, and I was so terrified talking to my mother, and she had me on speakerphone. My sister was hearing me. Well, my husband walked through the door, and when he did, I heard the glass door open, and I just let out a blood curdling scream. He scared me half to death. And then he screamed because I scared him, and then I screamed again, and it was, you could tell, my mother could tell I was just very, very traumatized by what had happened.
Now, a couple times you just told me about some of the stuff you've seen around your property, walking around through the woods, and I've seen some of the pictures that you've taken on your walks in the woods. Have you seen any tracks?
Yes, sir. I have. The first track I found was not this past December, but December before, in 2013. No, 2013. My granddaughter was over here, and I tell her about Bigfoot. She just loves Bigfoot, and ever since this has been going on, she's been 2 years old. I've been taking her with me, and around the yard, we'll say, let's go look for Bigfoot, and we walked out to the garden, and lo and behold, there were footprints going through the garden, and they were left foot, right foot, going across the garden, and the dogs kept. I don't know if you've seen the video of my dog jumping up on me and stuff. Well, he was trying to jump up, and I couldn't keep him away from the footprint, so I just got one, and I was scared he was going to knock her down, so I got one, and I had my foot beside it, and it appears to be, I wear a size 9 wide, ladies, and it was really a lot longer than mine and a lot wider than mine, and it being December, nobody'd be out there barefooted. But it did look old, but you could see where the mud had, smushed it through its toes and outward. I mean, it was like, when somebody walks in mud, how it squash up.
Right. Yeah.
Found it.
And then
I had an experience in November and 1st of December. I found what I believe to be 2 nests, and they were pretty big. But the reason why I found that is because I was sitting here one night, and 2 weeks before that, the thing comes yelling through my yard, and the way I found out how I got the recording, my dog started howling, and I go and I open the window, and lo and behold, here's this thing that's been yelling in the wood line, was chasing my dogs, or my dogs were just running. They had their tail between their legs, they had their head back, watching as they were running under the house and one over the gate of the porch. And this thing, it was coming through my yard, and I run downstairs. There's where my cell phone is. So I come up here, and I get to the window, and it's already about 1/4 of a mile away from me down in the woods. but you could still hear it. And it was running, it was fast, and it had that long guttural yell. And it had a roar to it. And it had my dogs bark. I think my dogs barked one time after that. And then as it was going down in the woods, it got all the coyotes upset. And you could hear, even though, I don't know if you can hear it good, because it was on my cell phone that I recorded it on, but it sounds like a man, and it's got that long guttural yell, and it was and it had a roar to it. And about 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in my bedroom, and I'm watching TV, and I've got my bedroom's at the front of the house, and my bathroom's at the back of the house, and I had my TV on, and I was sitting in my chair beside my little table, and I was texting a friend of mine in our group. And I was just talking away through him and watching TV. I wasn't really watching TV or whatever. I was just concentrating on what I was texting. Then I said, man, there's something going on. So I jump up and I run to the bathroom. What it sounded like was a baby. And it was continuously crying at the time. And I said, that sounds like a baby. I just thought to myself. And I said, ooh. And I run back in here, and I grab my phone, I go in there, and I'm so nervous. Well, it wouldn't have showed up anyway, because there's no light in there. But if you look at the video, you can see the time. It was 10:25 p.m., and it was dark. And so it was crying, but it had calmed down some. And I was thinking, where's my dog? I've got a watchdog, a German Shepherd, and the slightest noise, they're right there. And I've got a Labrador Retriever, and she'd be there too. But they wouldn't come out. And I sit there and I recorded it, and when I did, it calmed down, and then it stopped. And then that's when my dog got brave enough, whatever it was, he sensed it was danger down there. And so he jumps off when he thinks it's gone. He goes barreling down to there, just 90 to nothing, barking aggressively. And when he gets down to the place, right before he gets to the place where it was crying, I could tell by where the sound was coming at, and you could hear it go. He goes, oh, and then he turns around and he barks one more time, and he's back on the porch.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that recording a couple of times. It was very interesting after I talked to you to find out the recording I'd listened to a couple of weeks earlier was your recording.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm on a little bitty cell phone, and the sound probably doesn't, you can't hear what I was hearing, but it wasn't anything that I've ever heard before.
Right. Now, I know a friend of mine from Sasquatch Investigators of the Rockies, Robin Roberts, was down visiting you this last summer, and I've seen some of her pictures, and you guys have found some other things around your property besides just the nest and the footprints. Would you tell me about that?
Well, like I said, I had started a group on Facebook, and she came into it, and I opened it up because I had no knowledge, and I had to take a crash course, and everybody believed what I was saying. I mean, but I didn't have no evidence, and so other than when Alabama Bigfoot Society came up here and we went investigating, and she saw one while I was here, and it followed us about the woods. So so Robin and her husband comes from Colorado to Alabama, and there were several people from Mississippi and other places in the state. They came to Deer Lick. We camped out at Deer Lick, and we did some investigation, not over there, but we had an experience over there anyway. We came here, and Dorothy did a presentation, and then afterward, we was going to go out and we was going to find the best place. I had a big map out, and I said, well, I can take you to all these different places, but let me tell you this. I'm going to tell you where I know there's been activity. And I started dotting little red dots all over that thing, all over that map.
Right.
And so stuff. We went to all those places and we did. They Robin found footprint. They found the territorial markers, the cross, the X's.
Right, they found stick structures, and you guys found some tree breaks also, didn't you?
Oh yes, and we later on the next day, everybody left. Robin and John and I, we went down to the killing zone, and that's the story behind that too. But it's where they hunt. As a matter of fact, at night it come running through the yard. That's where it was headed. We found a lot of things down that way, and we went walking back behind my house on the road, and we went down into a creek, and we heard, rock tapping. We just found a lot of stuff and heard a lot of stuff, and I may be forgetting. Like I said, I'm a little nervous, and I'm pacing the floor, so I'm trying my best.
No, you're doing a really good job. We understand that. Sometimes this isn't easy for people to talk about, and you get excited from your experiences, and it makes you a little nervous. That's understandable.
But no, we found that there was every place that I marked. We found wood markings and structures and stuff like that. I mean, everywhere I marked. And even Robin stated that there was about 4 places around my house they watched my home.
Right. Now, from the way you describe things, sounds like there's more than one of these creatures in your area. Now, do you feel you maybe have a whole family unit in your area?
I believe so. When they started coming up in 2012, in 2011, a lot of people, we own a good bit of, family property, and it's private property, and we've got about 10 lakes, fields, swamps, and everything. But everybody around here started strip cutting. I mean, leaving the ground bare. And some of these woods, there's no human been through those woods in eons of years. And they have been living back over in there because, like I said, there's been a history of them up here before. But when they started cutting the woods, that's when they started coming in. They did get aggressive when they first came. After they scared me and I wouldn't go outside and everything. One night my husband woke up. I wasn't feeling good. My daddy had passed away, and I was going downstairs and I fainted on him. But when I came to, he said, "I want to ask you something. Have you been hearing that thing that was been coming up the yard yelling for the past 3 nights?" Now my husband doesn't hear good, and he wears hearing aids, but he don't sleep in them. But it was loud enough that he could hear it and where it was coming from, and it was coming from the right side of the house, that upper drive. And he goes out. I asked him, I said, "Why didn't you wake me up?" He said, "Because I knew you'd make me go out there and see what it is." He couldn't find it. But anyway, he went out there later on after that 3rd night, and the fence is up off of the road. I mean, if you come off the road, you'd hit the bank. You wouldn't hit the fence. And something had pushed the boards out, and it's a heavy fence. We had 2,000-pound bulls in it, and they never tore it down, and they would wrestle in there. But he said it looked like somebody took 3 posts out there and rimmed them up out of the yard. You know how you rim? What I mean by rimming, they push it back and forward and sideways and sideways.
Right.
They
And
were
then
just
pull it
leaning
up.
over, and he said all I had to do was just pick them up, and they'd fall out. And they were buried 2.5, 3 foot deep.
Right. Well, these creatures have been known to be extremely strong. Now, you were telling me another time about some how they got pretty close to you in your house. You want to tell me about that? On your porch?
Yeah. We came in from church one night, and I heard something going on upstairs. It sounded like somebody was in my bedroom. And I said, "We got an intruder." We come up through there, and I didn't see the dogs when I came in, but I said, I grabbed the pistol and gave it to my husband. We both came up here to my bedroom, and he said, "Hey," and we got to looking around. We looked in the closets, looked in the bathroom. There was nobody in here, and there were loud knocks on the outside of my wall, not down on the roof line. I'm talking about the porch roof line. And you could hear it. I'm going to knock on the door. It was about, like that. And it was knocking. It would make like 3 knocks. And we listened outside from my bathroom window, and I could hear something out there moving on the porch, that asphalt, shingles. I could hear it, moving. But it was on this side, in between my carport and my bedroom. And my husband goes over there, and he starts knocking back on the wall, and it knocks back at him, and then he knocks again, and I said, what in the world is that? And the only thing, there's no trees that touch the house except for a little bitty maple tree on the other side, and it was too high for a coon to be up there, and what's going to get on my house other than maybe a cougar or a panther, whatever you call them, and they wouldn't sit there and knock. Cougar wouldn't knock back at you.
Right. Yeah, I don't think they knock for permission to enter. So this was on the second floor, and so there was a creature that was on the roof of your porch knocking on your bedroom wall, and your husband knocked and it knocked back. That's pretty amazing. I got to admit, that's the first time I've ever heard that. And probably a couple of dozen interviews that I've done over the last couple of years, and no,
it sounds phenomenal. But,
yeah.
But I'm telling you, my husband's here. He can tell you it happened, and it didn't happen just one night. It happened about 2 other nights later, and it woke me up about 1 o'clock. And then I went outside and I said, "Stay off my roof." And I go outside one afternoon. I heard the dogs barking, and something had climbed up in a big oak tree right beside the walkway, and it was way up, and that thing was about as big around as my leg, and broke that tree limb down, and it was so long it hit the ground and broke up toward the tree.
Right. Now, those are the pictures from in front of your house with the branch hanging down, and you had to have that branch cut down.
Yeah, I told him he had to build a plane just to get high enough with him lifting himself up with the tractor lift. And he still had to have an extension, power saw to cut that limb off.
Right.
But I had no storms, no lightning, no nothing. And it happened, I know when it happens because my dog started barking, and I walked out the front door, and I said, what in the world? And then I went out there and said, stay out of my trees in my yard, Next thing I know, during the day, about 3 o'clock, they got up an oak tree out there beside the road by the fence and broke a big limb out of that tree. But this time, they hit the ground, and when they hit the ground, they left a mark.
Right.
I think you'll find my pink toenail flip-flop polish.
Right. Yeah, I've seen those pictures too. Those are pretty interesting. Well, it sounds almost like you got some teenagers causing some problems around your area, and they're not teenage people. You may have some juvenile Sasquatch around there that just like to mess around with you. At least they have a sense of humor. You got to enjoy that.
I miss them. When I don't hear from them, I do miss them. I come out of my fear a lot. I'm not as afraid as I used to be. What really scared me is I had no knowledge and everything. That's why I opened the group. And we, Robin and Arlo Williams and all those people, they have been just jewels to me because I knew nothing. All I knew was possibility there was a Bigfoot, and lo and behold, it started showing up. And to be honest with you, that same yell came up about 13, 14 years prior to that with my son here, and it scared us, but we couldn't put two together, and I knew it wasn't something that I'd ever heard of here in these woods, and then we got in the house with that. But we didn't associate it with Bigfoot, but after we heard it the first night, after seeing those shows, I knew that if you mimic them, they mimic you back. They call back, yell back at you.
Right. Well, after having 3 years of experience, and it sounds like it's totally changed your life, I know it did with mine after I've had mine encounters. It changed the way I looked at a lot of things. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about? We're going to wind this up here in a minute.
Yeah, well, Leon, I want to say this. Up into that first recording, I got up yelling through my yard. Okay, all I had was an old print that I saw. And I can understand why people are so hesitant about going and telling people what they see. I am a minister of the gospel, and my husband is too. And there's one thing about it. I'm going to have to stand before God one day. And I'm not going to lie about it. And my words will not change. But my family and my neighbors have ridiculed me and made fun of me. And when I got that first recording, buddy, I was rejoicing in the Lord. And I let them hear it, and it was like, give somebody a break. I mean, why would they want to lie and discredit their reputation like that?
Right. And I know I've had people look at me like I was crazy after I told them about some of my experiences. Well, I appreciate you taking all this time this evening and talking to me about this. And we really enjoyed talking to you. And
I appreciate you having me.
All righty.
I hope it could help somebody else, in some way.
Right, and that's the biggest thing why we're doing this is to get the information out there. People that have had experiences might not know what it is, and tie some of this to some of their experiences. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you.